Welcome to our final session on social outcomes. Social outcomes are an important consideration in the delivery of world-class infrastructure. It's my pleasure to introduce Debbie Kirby to facilitate a discussion on social outcomes. Debbie Kirby is a General Manager, Corporate Social Outcomes, and has led this function across Downer for several years, which includes building a talent pipeline with external partners such as the Ministry of Social Development, Te Puni Koukuri, and the Department of Corrections. Debbie's early career was spent in social services and learning and development before moving into the generalist HR space. She is passionate about supporting people with challenges in gaining and maintaining employment into the workforce and is very proud of her work Downer does in this space. Debbie also holds the role of GM People and Culture for the Downer Transport business. So welcome, Debbie.
Koto, tēnā koutou katoa. And my name is Debbie Kirby, as introduced, and I'm delighted to be here to facilitate the panel on this very important topic. How can we best leverage infrastructure investment to deliver better social outcomes? I think the fork in the road theme is so apt for this topic. It does feel like we're at the start of something big and that the choices we make today have the potential to have a major impact on our nature's future. I also think it's great that we're utilising this forum to have these kind of discussions. And I think it's a measure of how far we as a country and as an industry have come, that this is a front and centre topic. I'm aware that this is a challenging sort of mid-afternoon slump time, but I like to think that it's such an interesting subject that it's a genuine energiser for those of us who have been attending through our laptops for the day. I know you will enjoy the views of our fantastic panel members who all bring diverse experience and perspectives. Let's think big. Just tell you a little bit about Downer before we move into the panel. So Downer have been working within the social outcomes field for a number of years now. I started with the company in 2009 in the training and development space, and as Claire introduced, coming from a background in social services. I was fortunate to be a part of the development of an initiative following the Christchurch earthquake. This was created in partnership with MSD, whereby we trained and then employed people off benefits into our workforce. So from that small but really successful start 10 years ago, Downer now employs a team of 14 in our corporate social outcomes function. And this team recruit, train and provide pastoral support to employees who may have challenges gaining and maintaining employment. We're very appreciative of and proud of our partnerships with the Ministry of Social Development and Te Puni Koukuri that assist us to provide this support. Over the past 10 years within Downer, this work has changed the fabric and culture of our organisation. One of our 5 strategic points of difference is to be an influential contributor to New Zealand Inc. And we believe that our social responsibility includes having a workforce that is reflective of the communities we work within. We acknowledge the place that tangata whenua hold within Aotearoa, and we strive to be an employer of choice for Māori. In fact, we believe we are an employer of choice for Māori. We know that stable, sustainable employment is one of the key factors for healthy families, whānau and communities, and that's the cornerstone of our current offering. I mentioned, and it was mentioned in the introduction, that I come from a social services background. In my opinion, having worked both within social services and within corporate, is that the outcomes that are gained through the corporate channel for individuals are greater than what could be facilitated through social services alone. And I think that's because if you start with employment and build the support around the individual to be able to maintain it, the results are life-changing, and the ripple effects into whānau and community go a long way. I think the results for Downer are also worth a mention. This is not by any means a one-way street. We get loyal, committed employees, and our people are supported into meaningful work with career pathways. Our employees are proud to work for an organisation that values and practices whanaungatanga. Engaged employees are pivotal to our business success. But while Downer has some good experience in this area, I believe we're just scratching the surface of what can be done on a larger scale, utilising infrastructure investment to deliver social outcomes across our communities. We need to talk about the bigger picture. We need to talk about how genuine outcomes are valued and supported through the procurement process and how contracts can be set up to facilitate this. I agree we're building nations, and I'd also like to throw building futures into the mix as an aspirational catchphrase, because that's what we have the opportunity to do here, for individuals, for whānau, for organisations, for communities, and for New Zealand. I don't want to spend too much time because we've got such fantastic panel members. So I'm delighted to now open up to our panel to start this discussion. We're extremely fortunate to have these panel members take the time out to share their views with us. Thank you very much for giving up your time to be here. I'm going to hand over to each of them individually to introduce themselves. And I'm going to start with Kumeroa, or Coombs, as she's known within Downer.
Cool. Thank you, Debbie. Kia ora everyone, my name's Kumeroa, but I'm also known as Coombs, and I'm a water site engineer for Downer in the utility side of the business here in Tauranga. So prior to joining Downer, I had a diploma in civil engineering, and then my Downer journey started in 2017 as I came through the Downer Basics program. And with that, they put me into employment with the Infrastructure Alliance team in Hamilton, which was a maintenance team. And I was just like a general worker labourer. Looking back, I actually really enjoyed it, and I'll do it all over again. And then after that, I did a 3-year cadetship with Downer, and I rotated through all the different divisions within the transport department. And then during that time, I also got to volunteer with VSA in the Solomon Islands, and that was eye-opening, and it actually made me choose my career path, which was water. And from that experience, I'm really passionate about water, and ultimately I want to help developing countries bring up their standard of living through upgrading their water infrastructure and even schooling, making sure they've got the good facilities to learn in. And yeah, that's me.
What about your, tell us about your latest role within Downer outside of your job role. What are you doing through our Māori leadership program?
Yeah, so I did the Wahine tour. I was on the pilot program for Wahine tour leadership course, and it was just all females. And then from that course, I got asked to join the board, Te Ara Whānaki, to represent the under 30s and to give them a voice. So yeah, I've been a part of that as well.
Great. So we might hear a little bit about that later. So that's Ngā Kaitiaki o Te Ara Whānaki, which is our Māori Leadership Development Advisory Board. So great to have Coombs on that and being a voice. Thanks very much. Alice, welcome.
So love your story, man. It's awesome. You've done so many amazing things so far. It's exciting to see. Kia ora koutou. So my name is Alice Bray. I am the Senior Procurement Advisor for Sustainable Procurement here at Waka Kotahi. But I've also just started a part-time secondment with Mihika ki Poneke, which is Wellington City Council, my hometown. So I'm very excited to start off that part-time secondment there. And I guess as far as a mission goes, it's really about changing the way that we think about procurement. I've been in the government procurement space for about 6 years now, and have covered everything from corporate to IT, social services, and now infrastructure. So quite a diverse background there, but what really makes my heart sing and where I really think the impact is in the social and sustainable outcome space. And social procurement's where it's at. It's the way of the future, but funnily enough, we've kind of been doing it for a long time. We just might not have known it. So I'm very excited to be on the panel today, and I think one of the key themes, which I'm sure we'll talk about, is the fact that we need to be a bit more bold and a bit more brave. And I totally tautoko what you were saying there, Debbie, about scratching the surface. I think we'd be silly to think that we can't do better and can't do more in this space, and Aotearoa should be the perfect size country to be able to do stuff all across the motu and make real big impact. So kia ora.
Kia ora, Alice. Thanks very much. Helmut.
Kia ora tātou. Helmut Modlik's my name. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Te Rima o Tō Rangatira. Most of you be thinking that's a funny name for a Māori to have. That's another story. We'll pick that one up later. Good to be with you here today. The kaupapa of this conference is one that is really close to my heart and highly relevant to the last year and a half journey that Ngāti Tour's been on, which I've had a hand in. Our iwi, so Ngāti toa, if you don't know, is the mana whenua at the bottom of the North Island, top of the South Island, amongst others of our relations and allies that occupy that same whenua. But Ngāti toa's aspirations are captured really by our desire to do everything in our power to enhance the well-being, prosperity and mana of our people and those who live on our whenua, our manuhiri who live in our rohi o takiwaki. And our strategy for achieving that aspiration is essentially to row our own waka, to do everything directly in our power to achieve that enhanced state of well-being and prosperity and mana. And pursuing that strategy, though, we aren't ignoring for a second that there are a whole lot of other people who've got statutory, contractual, ethical, legal, or other obligations to support the achievement of that state of relative social and economic equity. But we're just not relying on anybody doing that very well, because that's our historical experience. However, having said that, and there's a little bit of reverse psychology when I throw that out at our erstwhile partners and invite them to surprise us and prove them wrong. The primary strategy in terms of how we then work with others is through a word that does get bandied around a lot, but which we are very attuned to, and it's the idea of partnership. And working in an authentic way with people who actually share our aspirations to build, to use the language of this conference, to build our nation together. And just as a last reflection before I quit my intro, is so in the last year, I've been heavily involved with the establishment of a partnership, an alliance called Te Aranga here in Porirua, which is between Ngāti Toa, Kainga Order and the Porirua City Council, where we have, I'll be bold enough to say, we're boldly going where no woman or man has gone before in respect of what an alliance can look like when it is a genuine partnership between mana whenua, local government and a Crown agency. And I no doubt through the Porirua I'll share some elements of that. But I'm very pleased to be with you today and share, for what it's worth, some reflections on the journey that I've been involved with over the last while. Kia ora, Waka.
Kia ora, Helmut, that's great, and looking forward to talking a little bit more about that partnership as we go through the discussion. Excellent. Thanks, Stephen. Over to you.
Thank you. Kia ora, Debbie and our virtual audience. It's good to be here today. I'd just like to recognise Downer in getting us along today. Downer is a key partner to the Department of Corrections in helping us in many ways produce better social in New Zealand. So yeah, thank you, Debbie and Downer, for getting us along. My role is Director of Asset Management in Corrections. So I'm a property guy. And I, with my team, oversee a pretty broad spectrum of managing our estate, our infrastructure estate, from the future thinking, strategic asset management side through to very operational facilities maintenance side, as well as capital projects. We've got procurement, commercial and governance processes in that as well. So some complexity in the coverage of me and my team, but quite a complex estate, as you can imagine. We've got 18 prisons. Each of those think of as its own little city, and it has to be self-contained. And not understood is we've got 160 community sites as well, where we also manage and look after people in our care. That's $6 billion worth of infrastructure, a lot of it very old, and some of it not coping too well. We have in our care around 8,000 prisoners at the moment inside the custodial estate. That was about 10,800 3 years ago. So quite a decrease in the prison population, but we still have 30,000 people in the community in our care. So, you know, quite a lot of infrastructure, but to look after a lot of different people. But as a property guy, we're support crew. We're supporting probably about 8,000 frontline staff to do a pretty tricky job with some very troubled people. And so infrastructure really comes to the fore in supporting what they do to hopefully change lives. And I might just chuck in a couple of statistics that aren't pleasant to listen to, which is why it's important that we discuss these things today. Of those 8,000 prisoners, 53% of those are Māori. We've got of the people 25 and under, 90% of those people have had some contact with mental health services. 42% of prisoners, once released from prison, are reconvicted of some crime within 12 months, 42%. Now, even worse than that, 68% of Māori released from prison are reconvicted within 12 months. And our women, 65% are Māori. Now, 68% of those have been a victim of family violence. 62% of those women have some sort of lifetime alcohol dependency. So I explain our infrastructure as big and complex, but those in our care are complex and troubled, and getting more so. And which is why we have developed the Hokairangi strategy, which has been enforced now since 2019. And that's a corrections-wide strategy of really putting well-being of all people associated with us, the well-being of those people at the front. And I'll talk a little bit about that further on, but that really just brings to the fore that the theme of our discussions, we have to deliver better social outcomes for New Zealand. Infrastructure is a very real part of that solution, but with those sort of statistics, we have to get on with producing a better outcome. Back to you, Debbie.
Yeah, thanks very much, Stephen. They're really sobering statistics. So good for us to be putting them out there on the table. I'll come back to you for a start. Can you tell us about some of the things that you're currently doing in this space, Stephen? What's working well? And what are your aspirations in terms of thinking big for the future?
Thanks, Debbie. I'll sort of continue. Number one, probably it's important to say is our core system is important. We have a duty and a role for public safety in our society, and that will always continue. Unfortunately, it's real, and it's part of being in a society that we have to have a certain amount of our system that is a custodial estate. But that within that custodial estate and the people that we are now getting, we're kind of a landlord, we're a receiver. We don't decide who we get and for how long we keep them. But certainly our aim is to only see them once. But unfortunately, in terms of those statistics, it's not always that way. We have a lot of people with poor mental health and physical well-being that come to us. A lot of alcohol and drug problems that they bring with them. We have increased violence in our prisons, and a large increase in gang influences within the prison estate. And so it is a harder environment to manage, and we are managing that with our justice sector partners. So that's the Ministry of Justice, principally Ministry of Justice and police. But that criminal justice system is changing, and the opportunities and innovation is really on the edges of those systems, the upfront and the upstream and the downstream side. And probably just give you a couple of examples of some successes that are on their way or producing returns at the moment. If you look at the upstream side, remand is certainly a problem when people first come into the system. And if you think of an 18-year-old, for some reason he comes to the police and confronts the justice system, and if that person does not have a good address for the police to take them back to, or somewhere away from the people that they're with, then they'll be in remand. And that, unfortunately, is often a path to gangs, to violence. 18-year-olds, I know I've got one, they're not fully formed men. They sometimes are, scared individuals with a tough exterior. And so you get on a path to, unfortunately, being a guest of ours for many years. If we can produce a different outcome at that very first point, if we can have a safe address for people that come into us on remand, we can potentially change what they do. And so we're looking with our other justice sector partners in the Hawke's Bay for some alternatives to remand, and that may be a kind of a managed residential address. We've got some opportunities that we're looking at the moment to develop a facility just for that purpose. It's not going to suit everyone, but it's going to grab a few. So that's at the upstream end. The downstream end is really important as well, and that's really trying to transition people away from the custodial environment into more of a pro-social life in the community. And that's where our housing and the community programs are very important. And a lot of that is in partnership with people, with Kāinga Ora, with our iwi partners. So far, we've delivered 100 beds in various forms throughout New Zealand. And that's a place where someone can base themselves. If they come out of prison, they can get a job. They can cook a meal for themselves. They have a safe place to go back to where they don't need to associate with the people that they used to. They can have treatment options, and they can have a start of a different future. Now, these are people that we're not putting extra people into the community. They're people that are there at the moment. You share the supermarket queue with them already, but it's just helping manage them in a different. In the Waikato, with Waikato Tainui, and also Kāinga Ora, we've got 47 homes there that are proposed, and that's a quite a specific village-like development that we'll be able to have whānau involvement. There's separate women, again, to have their whānau with them, to have their children back with them, and maybe help them care for those children in a different way if that's been an issue. So really wraparound services for people as they come out rather than just to the street. And a future-looking opportunity that we're looking at is really greenfields. What are new network options for the future? Now, that's thinking 10, 15 years out and acquiring land that we're not sure really what it's going to be, but to be able to have choices later on that probably isn't a prison, maybe some sort of managed facility, again, for some of those people transitioning out into the system. But to do that on a decent scale. And again, iwi partners are really important with that because they bring connections, they bring whānau, they bring potentially land opportunities as well. So we're planning for an unknown future. And there's challenges with that as well, with getting Treasury funding. Treasury don't like giving you money to buy something that you're not sure what you're going to do with. There's, issues with all of this, with community support and getting people to understand that having these people in the community and treating them in a different way, again, you're in the supermarket with them. And RMA reform too is going to be part of this, and I think it's part of discussions in this conference, is that has to be supportive of social outcomes. And at the moment, it's quite environmentally focused. It's still in the making, so there's lots of work to do, but we just have to make sure that that does help support social outcomes as well. So look, Debbie, I hope I didn't take too much time, but that's just an example of successes that we're working on at the moment.
Right, well, and look, you touched on a whole lot of things, which I think is a really good place for us to start, because there's lots of, you talked about actually infrastructure investment in terms of building, you talked about health, mental health, you talked about employment in terms of how we would build some of these things, you talked about partnership, you talked about funding, and I think when we're looking at thinking big, it's how will these things connect together to support social outcomes. I think it's a good way, we'll drop you in it, Alice, as being the government representative here, and ask you to talk a little bit about that. How can government agencies support these kind of aspirations? Some of the things that Stephen have talked about, some of the aspirations even that Helmut touched on, at what's working well at the moment, and where do you see the government part to play in this?
Yeah, and I think that's an awesome place to start, because obviously government, we're part of the public service, and it's what it says in the title, right? We're here to serve the public. And I think sometimes we can get lost in that, in these building of big pieces of infrastructure and all the engineering and technical expertise that wraps around it. We don't need infrastructure if there is no people. So we should be always driving back to the people and what do the people need. And I like the fact that we've already touched on the fact that, there are some members of our community who we are standing shoulder to shoulder with, whether we know it or not, that actually need a lot of help and a lot of support. And they've ended up in situations through a lot of the time no fault of their own. And I think that's a really good place to start, because the projects that have done a lot of good work in the social outcome space have put people first and have wrapped requirements, specifications, programs and everything around the people, but they have started there. They haven't gone, oh, well, we'll grab this PDF guide and we'll grab this overseas model and we'll just throw it on the ground and see what happens, and then 5 years wonder why it's not working. And I think that's because we're not focusing on that people element. But there's so many things that we're actually able to achieve, and I think that's the real role of government, and where we have you know, agencies like Waka Kotahi, agencies like Ngāti, corrections, all of these big procuring agencies, when we are building infrastructure, the whole question around social outcomes and social procurement is that if we're already going to build this piece of infrastructure, what more can we do? It's the add-on, and that's where, you know, the government mandate for broader outcomes comes in. But social procurement's not open heart surgery. We've just been doing the same thing for like 30, 40, 50, 60 years. So anything that is slightly different to that, that makes us think outputs, makes us think outcomes rather than outputs, is just everyone sort of freaks out a little bit. But I think if we come back to something that we can all relate to, and that's being people of Aotearoa, of this land, and what's important to us, and what are some of the challenges that we're struggling with, poverty, struggles, a lot of our socioeconomic struggles could be solved by using social outcomes and social procurement. All of those sort of outcomes that we can solve. And we have these gigantic, huge capital projects that have long-term impact on them just because of the nature of the scale of them. You know, these pieces of infrastructure, particularly roads and cycleways and bridges, they're there to endure. So how fantastic if we had to reach into the community and say, would you want to build this with us, and give people the opportunity to be a part of that. And we've already got partnerships in place to be able to do that. Some of them we've just talked about. So I think that's the role of government, is just to help facilitate that, particularly we're public sector money, we're public sector funded. So it makes sense that we should be serving the public, not just in the building of the infrastructure, but in the pursuit of these social outcomes, because it fundamentally makes generational long-term impact. And I don't know anyone who wouldn't want to get on board with that. So I think that's the role of government, the facilitator, the partnership, you know, together in partnership with our suppliers, with iwi, with hapu, with the community. That's what we should be doing, because that's what we're here to serve.
Great, thanks, Alison. I like what you're saying. You know, we talk about it. It's not, you know, we know that we know where we want to get to. We're going to talk a little bit later about how we tangibly do that. What are the building blocks, and what are the measures we put in place? And I think there's a big government part to play in that, in terms of holding people accountable for those outcomes. Over to you, Helmut. It'd be interesting to hear some of the things that you've talked about, and boldly already going where no woman or man's gone before. So are we thinking big enough in terms of what we're trying to achieve? And where do you see this heading? Looking at what you're doing currently, what's working well, and where do you see the future of social procurement heading?
So, you know, we're definitely not thinking big enough, and we're probably not even thinking the right thoughts at the moment in terms of the framing we're placing on it. The language that's used for social procurement, and, you know, the procurement bit of it is a you know, long established discipline. It's highly technical, you know, very formalized, aimed at transparent and competitive, etc. What we're talking about has got nothing to do with that whole paradigm. This is actually a community development, social development conversation, right? And so that's the first observation I'd make, that if everybody, whether you're a procurement professional or supplier, and you're coming at this and you're thinking, oh, this is about the provision and the purchasing of goods and services, that ain't the kaupapa. The kaupapa is the name of this conference, Building the Nation, and the fact that we have this enormous equity gap between the haves and the have-nots. It's arisen out of historical reasons which we can do nothing about, but what can we do today and tomorrow that aims to close that gap? That's the first observation, a paradigm shift, and possibly some change in language, that what we're actually doing is looking to build our community. That's the first point. Second point, in terms of thinking big enough. So I was invited to be a party to a workshop a year ago to brainstorm how we might collectively as a nation ensure universal COVID tracing and eventually COVID vaccinations. Well, we clearly didn't achieve either of those, but in the workshop, we concluded relatively quickly, and it was a shocking conclusion, that that there is not a single public policy outcome that we could think of that was ubiquitously or universally present. Not fresh water, not education, not housing, not food, not anything. And you think about how significant that observation is. There is not a single public policy outcome that our current machinery of government and constitutional arrangements can deliver ubiquitously, universally. Not one. Now, the takeout from that is, we found ourselves at the moment we're facing an existential threat as a consequence of COVID. All the rules changed. Money flowed. Officials didn't have to go through all the other processes they usually did to risk manage. And boom, the team of 5 million miracle kicked in, and we did achieve the miracle. The takeaway from that is, in fact, if you want to achieve universality of anything, you have got to involve, empower, inform, and resource the community to tap into that team of 5 million miracle thing, where the community does their bottom-up thing, and then the local and central government do their top-down thing. They meet in the middle, poof, we get the miracle. Now, that hasn't happened since, and it sure as heck ain't happening now. So coming back to the kaupapa in question, and I'm going to reflect just briefly, if I might, on Stephen's observation about the lane that he swims in as the manager of $6 billion worth of assets and all the rest of it. The truth of the matter is that the way that our institutions are organized into silos of accountability, resource, and management is understandable. It's how it's done internationally every reason. But people don't live their lives in silos. And complex social problems are multifactorial. The truth of the matter is, Stephen, there is next to nothing you will do while the citizens of this nation are in your custodianship that will make a material difference in their lives. The root causes of their problems happen before they arrived at your doors, and what happens after they leave your care is what will determine what happens next. Yes, you can do things while they're in your custodianship that will hopefully not make it worse, but it's highly unlikely, as the evidence confirms, that it'll make it better. Now, my point of that is not to be critical of corrections, although it's a very bad name, by the way. My point of that observation is to make the point that all agencies swim in their lane, and they only do what's in their lane, but the needs don't reside solely in those lanes. Now, the answer to that we'll get to in a minute, but just coming back to what's the future and what's the big thought we want to think. It's this. The stakeholders in the well-being and prosperity of this nation need to be tapped into, informed, involved, and resourced to partner with the other stakeholders in a meaningful way in order to draw again on that power of the team of 5 million to achieve a miracle. And let's face it, team, turning around some of the equity gaps we got is going to need a damn miracle and a generation or two. But coming back to the point, that is the vision we need to have, and the mechanism of procurement, right? Coming back to the economic or social development framing, that is a mechanism for leveraging existing investment with a bit of imagination, right, to actually get additional direct and indirect benefits. I'll be happy to share in due course what that looks like. Kia ora.
Kia ora, thanks, Helmut. I might just move on to partnership now. We're going to come back and look at some sort of success stories and see, talk to you a bit later, Coombs. But while we're talking about this partnership, I'm really interested to open it up to Alice and Stephen and back to Helmut. What are the cornerstones of a true partnership in terms of social outcomes? Alice, what are your thoughts on that?
I think Helmut kind of put it perfectly. A partnership means that there are parts to play, and those parts cannot be played by anyone but that person or that partner. Waka Kotahi in a room cannot speak for mana whenua aspirations unless someone in the room whakapapas to that mana whenua. So that partner in the room, whoever that be, from whichever mana whenua or iwi or hapu that is their voice. They are that partner. Waka Kotahi, we bring our own expertise in design and thinking, but we are still only part of the wider puzzle. And I think that dynamic and that power shift that government has had for a long time, particularly in the procurement space of we hold the money and we hold the contracts, the mental shift, the power shift that needs to go on in the government procurement sector is one that moves away from we hold the money and give it to you out there to go and do that thing, because that is the complete antithesis of partnership, because it removes all sense of connectivity, it removes all sense of the people part that we were talking about at the beginning. And we're not going to find partnership, at the end of a 100-page RFP or a snazzy PDF. Partnership is built on trust, and trust is earned in raindrops and lost in buckets. It takes so little to break trust. And if we think about the state of Aotearoa and the challenges that we have gone on as a nation altogether, there are some unresolved challenges and residual emotions from challenges that we have gone on as a country. And we need to be really open about that. But I think partnership, just from my perspective, it kind of looks like a really healthy marriage. It's honesty, it's transparency, flexibility, adaptability, aroha, it's love, it's coming in, respecting who is there and the voice of who is there, and knowing that no one else can speak for anyone else in the room because everyone's there as equals.
I really like that. Thanks, Alice. And I reflect on what Helmut said about where we managed to achieve something where we hadn't before, and that was around the urgency of some of this COVID stuff and the team of 5 million, and that's around a shared goal, isn't it? Around saying we all needed to get somewhere really fast, and we all wanted to be in the same place. What are your thoughts on this, Stephen?
True partnership is probably where we've had success, and I do reflect on your comments there, Helmut. Wins are hard to get with some of the people on our care and management, and sometimes few and far between. But where we have had success is through partnership. It's through partnership with other agencies, but particularly iwi organisations, and being able to tap into their networks. I suppose that's our hokairangi strategy is all about partnership to get wellbeing for the people in our care. If you look at some of those housing things I talked about, they really couldn't come about without true understanding of each other's needs. We're a government agency, but it's stacked full of people that care. And I think if you can align yourself with other people that care, you can make a difference. And what we're talking about, we've got to be aspirational, and we've got to keep on trying to create a different outcome for some of these people. So I think true partnership is understanding each other's needs, but aligning to really try and make a difference.
Great, thanks, Stephen. Have you got something to add there, Helmut? I'm sure you do.
Of course I do. Kia ora. Look, first I just endorse what Alice said about the essential basis of a partnership. There's no partnerships occur between people, and there's no difference between what a good partnership is in any context. The essentials are, as Alice said. So I won't belabor that or repeat that, other than to reinforce that those are sound principles for effectiveness. In connection with what it looks like, though, in the context of the community and the Crown and commercial suppliers and wrapping in the social procurement kaupapa. So first off is what it looks like, as I was just signalled, is real people making real connections, authentically getting to know each other, building trust, taking the time to do that, face to face, and then going, okay, there is a mutuality of values, of aspirations, etc. here. We can trust each other. We can start a journey together. So coming back to corrections, so we've just recently signed a strategic partnership agreement with corrections, having followed that journey with Jeremy and executive team and others in that journey. Okay, cool. So then what happened? So having then formally agreed all of that stuff, we then found ourselves an initial initiative to operationalise our new trusted partnership arrangement. So here in Wellington and Nainai, there is a transition housing arrangement with Ngāti and Chatiawa have partnered up with corrections to provide a wraparound set of services where those men, when they come out of Dumutaka prison, will be supported by us in terms of a range of social services connections back to their people. Most recently, we've found a way through the provision of, well, I won't get into the long story, they're going to be able to get on a pathway to employment And so, again, trusted faces in the community, trusted voices, realistic wraparound support, now out of the formal day-to-day care of corrections, now they've got a chance. Now they've got a chance to have a difference in their life, right? That's what partnership looks like, where the strengths of the partners are brought to bear, appropriate sharing of trusted resource, information, etc. Now there's a chance. That's what it looks like. Coming back to the procurement issue, right? And leveraging the idea that there is already resource. Corrections budget, if I'm not misinformed, roughly on an annual basis is roughly as much as all of the treaty settlements that have ever been paid out every single year. That's what corrections gets for its optics. Think about that for a second. So resource isn't the deal, right? What the issue is how do we leverage the resource? How do we leverage the investment? How do we leverage the procurement activity that's going to find people that can be placed on pathways for enterprise formation, for enterprise growth, for employment, for training and development, and beyond. And that just takes a bit of imagination, a bit of organising, a bit of connecting with people in the community that's where they operate. You know, that's it. That's the short version.
Right, thanks, Kia ora, Helmut. And you're right, that it is absolutely attainable. We just need to put our focus on it. That's what the importance is. Going back to what Alice said, we need to care about these things and make it less about the contracts and the PDFs and the building. We need to really care about the people. And it's a probably good opportunity to come over to you, Coombs, and to bring things down to a little bit more of an individual level and say, well, we're talking up here are things that we can do. Let's hear a little bit about your journey and some of the supports that have been put in place to enable you to be where you are today.
Sure. Thanks, Debbie. So during my cadetship, we got allocated a mentor, and my mentor was Mary Gaylard, and she worked for the HR side of the business within utilities. And she had a massive influence on me, especially during challenging times. Like, she was always there to give me guidance, advice, support, and how to approach these challenges. And but she was also there for the good times as well. But like, especially during those challenges, you know, she'd always tell me an experience, good or bad, is still an experience. And especially with the bad experiences, it's how you build resilience. You know, you can't get too disheartened by it. So whenever I had a challenge, it was always just another building block to build resilience. And she's still with Downer, and she's still my mentor. So, but yeah, she had a massive influence in my career, and still to this day, and not just work-wise, personally as well. And ultimately, it's just her utmost belief in me, It blows me away, like her belief, yeah. And that's what keeps me going. So that's the support that's most prominent in my mind from my time in Downer. But just going back to all the kaupapa you guys have been talking about, as I'm at the coalface, and I've done a few of these social outcomes programs through Downer, it's just following through. And what I mean by that is, so you employ people through these social outcome programs, and then you hand them over to a department, and they execute that work, say in construction or whatever, and then ultimately it's that manager in that department who now looks after them, where it's like, yeah, which is all well and good, but whoever employed them through that social outcomes program still has to follow through with them, and see how they're going and ask them how their progress is, and is there anything we can do to help you or support you and your manager to get the best out of you? Are you all right at home? You know, how's your personal life? And it's also, I think, from my perspective too, is like collating all this data and figuring out, hey, who's still around from these programs, who isn't? And that's a good starting point to start from, and then plan from there. I think that's really important. It'll pinpoint, you know, what you did well. Was it a personal life thing? Was it a work thing? What can we do better? So, yeah.
Great. Really appreciate that, Coombs, and it's a really good point, and something that we've learnt pretty quickly as an organisation. It's not just a matter of getting people in the door. It's all of that pastoral support and caring about the person all the way through that makes the really big difference. And what you talked about, that mentoring, it's bringing us right back down to the individual, isn't it? Around how do we continue to connect with our people? How do we provide opportunities for people to build resilience? I mean, it's a good thing for us to think about as individuals, but even when we're working in the corporate social outcomes space, resilience is one of those really important things. And how do we as a nation be building that within our nation is, I think, really important. So thanks for sharing. It's always good to come back and look at what's happening on the coalface. I wish we had more time to ask you a little bit more about some of the things that you've talked about. So we've talked about partnerships and we've talked about aspirations. How do we get from there to here? What's the roadmap from today to where we want to be, Helmut?
Yeah, that's a great question. So from Ngāti Toa's perspective, it looks like this. So we are progressively standing up a vertically integrated stack of commercial enterprises that are aimed at delivering directly to our priorities. At the moment, that's about residential housing. So we've got a team that's about the reacquisition of land. There's a TOR ITM to handle our building supplies. We're in acquisition mode in respect of civil construction and building companies. So there's a TOR architects, etc., etc. So that's the creation of a vertical stack of integrated businesses to do the housing priority thing. On the social service side, similarly, we already have quite a substantial portfolio of social services. We have 5 general practice clinics. We have a broad range of social services and educational services and vocational educational services, blah, blah. And so what we're in the process of doing is similarly creating an integrated ecosystem of support services, and integrated is the key word because of what I alluded to before of people's lives and issues don't sit in silos, right? They actually are multifactorial, and so the integrated ecosystem of support, which also weaves in the friends, family, hapuiwi stuff. So we've got this integrated, coherent support system where any door is the right door. Now, how does that relate back to the wider public and private sector partners? At the moment, if there is a procurement activity in play, right, the agency in question will do their needs analysis. They'll come up with a specification. They'll go to market and they'll advertise for, here's an RFP for I want 4 of those, 8 of those, 6 of those, a blue one and a pink one. And we stand up and we look at our people and their needs, and we look at their procurement schedule and we try to make a fit. And that's not it. All right, that ain't it. What we're doing increasingly is engaging with our growing list of partners in the public sector and private sector. So what's the outcome? Where are we at? What's the baseline? What's the high level outcome we're after? Okay, cool. Contract us to deliver the outcome. We'll be accountable, we'll be transparent, but because we're most intimately familiar with the detail, we're most proximate to the problems, we'll make the calls on a daily basis on the mix of service delivery to get the outcome, all right? So that's the kind of multifactorial, more outcome-oriented contracting that public sector agencies, and to be frank, our suppliers in the public-private sector also need to get their heads around, because it's really only that kind of partnered, multifactorial approach that's going to actually shift the dial, right, and push us on. That's what, in my view, the future looks like. And that's the challenge and invitation to everybody in this conference to think about and get your head around. And if you can, come and talk to Ngāti Toa, because you'll be my next best friend.
Great. Kia ora, Helmut. Thanks very much for that. I was going to ask you shortly for your key takeaway, but I think you've just nailed it there. So thanks very much for that. Really good thoughts. And from Stephen and Alice here working within the government agencies, what would be required to shift the mindset to that sort of model that Helmut's talking about? What do we need to do to move towards that?
Sorry.
Go for it.
Okay.
Righto. Look, I think you're right. A mind shift, broadly, yes. To change something, we've got to change minds. But I suppose I've seen a few different things happen, and an overnight success takes a while. It's built up of lots of little things that come together over time to produce change. You can't snap your fingers and the world changes. And that's a big part of some of these relationships. We talk about, you know, a good partnership being a marriage. You don't get married on your first date. You take some time to get that, to know that person and produce that partnership. You did, Helmut? You take some time to truly understand the other party's needs, wants, and I'm thinking including the people that we're responsible for that are in our system, to truly understand them. And then you can produce that mind shift or that great change. So it does take time. I think we have to accept it does take time, but we have to have a bit of a joint understanding of where we're going. And so I think a bit more of a combined vision is really important, which is why you see that the justice sector working together now, not just one agency, but 3 or maybe 5, working together to produce a joint vision and then combined outcomes. So I think, yes, a mind shift's required, but we've got to commit to the journey, commit to a long-term thing.
Great.
Yeah, and I'll just build on that, if that's okay, Debbie, because you've got a fixed mindset or a growth mindset, right? You can either find a problem for every solution or a solution for every problem. And I think, unfortunately, we're in a sort of time and place in the world where lots of people have got a problem for every solution. But you're one decision away from making something work, right? That's on you. It may be chaotic, difficult, challenging, hard, complex, may cost a lot, but there's still a solution. And 9 times out of 10, you don't even have to think of it yourself, because that solution is already in the minds of the community that you're not tapping into. So again, we're not creating something vastly new that's never been done before. We're going and talking to people, having an open mind, going in with our taringas wide open, listening to what needs to be done, and co-creating these solutions together. But we won't get there if we go, this is the way we've always done stuff, that will never work. Because the truth is, when it comes to investing in outcomes, particularly in the infrastructure space, if we'd been doing it well for a long time, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So people that say it doesn't work and it's too much and it's too complex and it's too costly, well, if we haven't done it on a large scale for a long amount of time, how do you even know that? You know, if we're gonna be an evidence-based decision-making body, we've got to have some evidence, right? And the evidence says in Aotearoa across the world that social outcomes and commissioning and procuring for outcomes works. In Australia, they're looking at social value models that prove that $1 of investment equals $4 to $5 of social outcome investment. And this is where we start seeing this breaking down of silos. Yes, Waka Kotahi builds pieces of transport infrastructure, but we can also be job creators. We can empower iwi to be kaitiaki of their own whenua. You know, we have the opportunity to actually do more than just build stuff. And I think that's the really cool part. The opportunity is there if we have the right mindset to go and take it.
Great, thanks, Alice, and some really good takeaways. I'm going to capture some of your little one-liners. I think they're great little reminders of how to look at the world. We're just about out of time, so I'm just going to quickly sum up in 30 seconds. And I guess to the audience, there's been all sorts of really good challenges thrown out to us today. Lots of interesting perspectives, a few examples, and I guess I just really encourage you to think about this differently, to think about corporate social outcomes and how we can head towards them, how we can work in true partnership, to be more curious around the things that others are doing and how we can leverage off that, how we can see what really good looks like and build on that, and that, you know, we can really build nations and build futures. So thanks very much for your time. Really appreciate your time from the panel. I was absolutely stoked that we've got some such different perspectives, and very much appreciate your time with us. So thanks very much. Back to you, Claire.
Thanks, Debbie, and to the panelists for another insightful session. So before I close this afternoon's session and thank the speakers and sponsors, we're just going to run through our poll again. So I want you to again vote on your top 3 advocacy issue that you want Infrastructure New Zealand to prioritise in 2022. So I'll just give you a few seconds to do that. So climate change is still up there, along with addressing the infrastructure deficit and attracting talent and retaining skills. So thank you. So thanks for that. And to our speakers and panelists this afternoon, and today's sponsors, Oricon, Fulton Hogan, Downer, GHD, Russell McVeigh, LGNZ, and to our premier sponsor, ANZ, for bringing this to us today. Francis Valentine's presentation made it clear that artificial intelligence and futures thinking are critical to understanding communities' future expectations of infrastructure. We also heard that relying too much on the past when making strategic decisions for the future can be risky, and that she stressed the value of diversity of thinking, which we'll explore further tomorrow. Paul Spoonley set the scene for demographic change and the implications for meeting future challenges, including balancing a range of infrastructure provision to population and investment in technology, education and training, as well as immigration. Our social outcomes panel considered a range of issues relevant to infrastructure investment in delivering social outcomes for our communities. So we're going to see you back here tomorrow for day 3, which is absolutely jam-packed. And we're going to hear from the Honourable Dr. Megan Woods, the Minister of Housing. We're going to have a panel on the role of renewable energy to decarbonise New Zealand. We've got an opposition panel by National MP Andrew Bailey. And then we have another ministerial address by the Honourable Michael Wood, the Minister of Transport. In the afternoon, we have a panel on public transport and urban regeneration, and we're going to hear about diversity. And then from the Infrastructure Commission, Te Wāhanga will present on their draft New Zealand infrastructure strategy, followed by Fran O'Sullivan, who's going to facilitate a political panel with the Honourable Michael Wood, the Honourable Julianne Genter, Simon Court, and David Bennett. And then we'll finish up in the evening with the Beacons Awards presented by the Honourable Poto Williams, the Minister for Building and Construction. So I'll look forward to seeing you back here tomorrow bright and early. So, but I now just want to hand over to Ateni to close the day with a karakia.
E te ti e te tā, anei rā te mihi. Ko whakarongo nei, ki ngā kai kōrero e kōreroa e whakapāho ana. Ana rātou nei kōrero i te rangi nei e pāna ki te kaupapa. Mihi tonu ki ngā kai whakahaere o te rangi, e tutuia i a rātou nei mai. Nō reira, ka huri anō ki a koutou, ngā manuhiri e whakarongo ki ngā kōrero. Ngā manu e kai ana te mata, nā te ao. Greetings again as we close this day today, and greetings to all of those who are still online. I support the thanks to those speakers of the day, and also to the team that has organised this conference. But mainly I turn to you, the people who have come in to listen. There is a proverb that goes in Māoridom, ko te manu e kai ana i te miro nō nā te ngāhere. Ko te manu e kai ana te matauranga nō nā te ao. Literally, translation, this whakatauki or proverb says, the forest belongs to the bird who feasts on the middleberry. The world belongs to the bird who feasts on knowledge. And today you've heard knowledge being spread amongst you. So today goes something like this. Kei inui tātou, let us give thanks. Kia horo te marino, kia whakapapa paunamu te moana, kia tere te karohirohi, I mua I tō huarahi. May peace be widespread, may the sea glisten like greenstone, and may the shimmer of light guide you on your way. Tūturu o whiti whakamaua kia tīna, haumi e hui e tā e ki e. Thank you.